All right, class dismissed. Bye, Sally. See you tomorrow.
Equal opportunity, two words that paint a picture of a possibility. But in the early 1950s, for millions of Americans, it was more like an impossibility. 50 years later, the legacy of Plessy versus Ferguson was well entrenched. For minorities, the separate but equal doctrine had resulted in inequalities in all facets of life, including public education. Then in 1954, the Supreme Court made a landmark decision that became one of the most important events in both education and civil rights history. In Brown versus Board of Education, the court ordered desegregation of the nation's public schools, reversing Plessy versus Ferguson and bringing about a change that many thought would never come and many hoped would never happen.
Black teachers contributed significantly to the financing of Brown versus the Board of Education. In fact, the American Teachers Association gave more money to the team's legal defense fund than any other single black organization. But success proved a double-edged sword. School districts in 17 states used the court-ordered desegregation as an excuse to fire hundreds of black teachers and administrators, and the students fared no better. In 1957, President Eisenhower was forced to send troops to Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. 1,000 soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division of the United States Army were sent to protect 9 African American students who had been denied access to their rightful place in the formerly all-white high school.
At the national level, NEA continued to advocate for change, refusing, for instance, to hold representative assemblies in cities that discriminated against delegates based on race. And the NEA-ATA Joint Committee, originally formed in 1926, first talked about unifying the two associations as early as 1945, but there was steadfast opposition from some affiliates. Now, in the wake of school desegregation, the 1964 Representative Assembly passed a resolution requiring racially segregated affiliates to merge, and talks to merge the National Association began in earnest.
Despite the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964, black teachers and others were continuing to fight discrimination and segregation in all areas of their daily lives.
Today I want to say to the people of America and the nations of the world that we are not about to turn around.
Civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. told his followers that change needed to happen from the inside. So new leaders would need to be elected. But how? Even though the 15th Amendment to the Constitution in 1870 gave all men the right to vote, many states used various methods to prevent people of color from voting, including literacy tests, poll taxes, threats, and even violence. The NEA-ATA Joint Committee sent leaders and staff to help teachers in Selma, Alabama, launch a voter registration campaign for black educators under the slogan, "Fit to teach, fit to vote."
The teachers joined 600 others on March 7, 1965, on a march from Selma to Montgomery to protest voter registration abuses. The group got only as far as the Edmund Pettus Bridge before state troopers, put in place by Governor George Wallace, stopped them with sticks, guns, pistols, and tear gas.
2 weeks later, after the press coverage of the violence left the nation stunned and horrified, Dr. King led a much larger group on a 5-day march all the way to the state capitol. 5 months later, President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 into law.
Meanwhile, after years of intense negotiation, NEA and ATA agreed to merge at the 1966 Representative Assembly in Miami. As the delegates sang, the presidents and the executive secretaries of the NEA and ATA signed a unification certificate bringing the two organizations together at last.
In 1968, NEA elected its first black president, Elizabeth Duncan Kuntz. The same year marked the creation of a Human and Civil Rights Division within the association to focus on protecting the rights of education employees and the students around the country.
They also uphold to this day the long-standing ATA tradition of granting human and civil rights awards to individuals and affiliates who expand education opportunities for minority students and educators. The merger between NEA and ATA had a far-reaching impact, not only for black teachers and students, but also for other minority populations, including women.
3 months after the merger, NEA sponsored a major conference on bilingual education and the concerns of Spanish-speaking students. The NEA conference led directly to the passage of the 1968 Bilingual Education Act, a great legacy for Braulio Alonso, who became NEA's first Hispanic president in 1967. NEA's dedication to ending the discrimination and inequality experienced by all minority groups date from as early as 1899, when it established a Department of Indian Education to research how the government policies were negatively affecting the education of Native American children. During World War II, the association was one of the few national organizations to speak out against the internment of Japanese Americans.
Protecting the rights of students and members and keeping them safe in and out of school has always been part of the special mission of NEA.
The face of public education has changed in the last 50 years. We know, we've seen it. I'm Paul Hubbard, Executive Secretary of the Alabama Education Association, a state affiliate of the NEA.
And I'm Joe Reed, Associate Executive Secretary. We've held these positions for the last 40 years. We've lived through these changes every day.
We believe strongly in NEA's vision and values. Like democracy, we believe public education is the cornerstone of our republic. Public education provides individuals with the skills to be involved, informed, and engaged in our representative democracy.
In a just society, we believe public education is vital to building respect for the worth, dignity, and equality of every individual in our diverse society.